This video is brought to you by Blessed Be God Boutique, maker of Catholic fashionable apparel, handmade accessories, and more. Francis just made what might be the most important appointment to the Roman Curia of his entire alleged papacy. For the first time since Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger held the office, a progressive theologian is now the prefect for the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, which had previously been called the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, or the CDF. And before that, it was called the Holy Office, or the Inquisition. And as an aside, for those who think the Inquisition was evil, you probably consume too much secular tellings of history, but that's another story for another time. The Inquisition was much more nuanced and much more complicated than what we're told. But anyway, the office today has much the same function as it always has, to provide clear teachings on the faith on behalf of the Holy Father and to address theological questions of the day. To give you an idea of just how important this office is, here's what the Vatican's website has to say about the form and function of the office. Quote, "The dicastery for the doctrine of the faith is constituted by a college of members, cardinals, and bishops, at the head of which is the prefect. The prefect is assisted by 2 secretaries, the undersecretary and also the promoter of justice. The dicastery staff is composed of officials who, under the coordination of the heads of their respective offices, attend to various questions to be followed on the basis of their competence and requirements of the congregation. The doctrine comprises 2 sections, doctrinal and disciplinary, each coordinated by a secretary who assists the prefect in the specific area of his competence, with the collaboration of the undersecretary and the respective heads of office. The doctrinal section details with matters pertaining to the promotion and protection of the doctrine of faith and morals. It also encourages studies aimed at increasing the understanding and the transmission of the faith in the service of evangelization, so that its light may be a criterion for understanding the meaning of existence, especially in the face of the questions posed by the progress of the sciences and the development of society. With regard to faith and morals, the section arranges for the examination of documents to be published by other dicasteries of the Roman Curia, as well as writings and opinions which appear problematic for the correct faith, encouraging dialogue with their authors and proposing suitable remedies in accordance with the norms of Agendi Ratio in Doctrinatum Examine." End quote. In simpler language, the integrity of the faith is handled by this office and by its prefect, as well as morality. And for the first time since the 1970s, an open modernist is in the office. And by open modernist, I mean someone who resides on the post-conciliar progressive wing of the order of things established in the Church at the Revolution of Vatican II, because prior to the Council, the conservative figures in the Church that we're used to seeing today would have been considered progressives in the old order of things. Now, that progressive is Archbishop Victor Manuel Fernandez, who was a ghostwriter for one of the, we'll call it, most controversial books written by a cardinal in recent years, and that's saying something. Most of you who rely on podcasts and EWTN for your Catholic news may remember this gem of a book. Archbishop Fernandez wrote, "Heal Me With Your Mouth, The Art of Kissing." Yeah, that's its title. You've heard of Theology of the Body, which traditional Catholics and conservative Catholics debate about the Catholicity of endlessly. This is something else entirely. With this book, there's, frankly, no debate. When the Vatican announced the placing of Archbishop Fernandez to the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, the announcement came with a highlight of some of his previous writings, and curiously, the one book that caused a media firestorm when it was published was not exactly included on that list. It's honestly the only book he wrote that anybody knows about. But that man is now in charge of protecting the integrity of the doctrine of the faith and protecting the integrity of the morality of the Church. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Diane Montagna appears to be the one who broke the news, which she did on Twitter. Now, according to her release, Archbishop Fernandez takes office in mid-September, just in time for the final stage of the Synod on Synodality to begin. That's reassuring. She also provides us this letter, which I will read in full. It's extremely revealing. This letter is from Francis to Archbishop Fernandez, and I'll break the letter up for you with a bit of commentary here and there. But it gives away the game plan. If the ape of the Church isn't here yet, it will be here very, very soon, theologically speaking. Letter of Pope Francis to the new prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, dated July 1st, 2023, from Vatican City. To His Most Holy Reverend Excellency Archbishop Victor Manuel Fernandez. Dear Brother, as a new prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, I entrust you with a task that I consider very valuable. Its central purpose is to guard the teaching that flows from the faith, in order to, quote, give reasons for our hope, but not as an enemy who critiques and condemns. The dicastery over which you will preside in other times came to use immoral methods. Those were times when, rather than promoting theological knowledge, possible doctrinal errors were pursued. Let's interject here. Here, Francis is calling it immoral that the church use the Holy Office, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, to prevent doctrinal errors from being spread. That is immoral to him. In the most plain language possible, here Francis is condemning the crushing of heresy by the Vatican. I wonder why he does that. I'll let me know in the comments why you think that is. Let's continue. You are Dean of the Faculty of Theology of Buenos Aires, President of the Argentinian Society of Theology, and you are President of the Commission of Faith and Culture of the Argentinian Episcopate, in all cases voted by your peers, who have thus valued your theological charisma. As Rector of the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina, you encouraged a healthy integration of knowledge. On the other hand, you were Parish Priest of Santa Teresita, and until now Archbishop of La Plata, where you knew how to bring theological knowledge into dialogue with the life of the holy people of God. Since for disciplinary questions, especially related to the Ted McCarrick problem, a specific section has recently been created with very competent professionals. I ask you as prefect to dedicate your personal commitment more directly to the main purpose of the dicastery, which is keeping the faith. In order not to limit the significance of this task, it should be added that it is a matter of, quote, increasing the understanding and transmission of the faith in the service of evangelization, so that its light may be a criterion for understanding the meaning of existence, especially in the face of the questions posed by the progress of the sciences and the development of society. These questions, taken in a renewed proclamation of the gospel message, become tools of evangelization because they allow us to enter into conversation of our present situation, which is in many ways unprecedented in the history of humanity. Let's interject here again. The new task of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, or the dicastery, rather, is to keep pushing the revolution in the church and the secularization of the faith by continuing to have the faith essentially be used for whatever our glorious secular leaders tell us are the big pressing problems of the day. So if you liked Amoris Laetitia, if you liked Laudato Si, if you liked Fratelli Tutti, if you love seeing popes show up at the UN and basically endorsing whatever's being talked about there, but basically telling them hold the brakes a little bit, but don't actually hold the brakes on whatever it is you're planning, you're going to love this guy. Let's continue. Moreover, you know that the Church, quote, needs to grow in her interpretation of the revealed word and in her understanding of the truth, without this implying the imposition of a single way of impressing it. For different currents of thought in philosophy, theology, and pastoral practice, if open to being reconciled by the Spirit in respect and love, can enable the Church to grow. This harmonious growth will preserve Christian doctrine more effectively than any mechanism of control. Let's interject again. This means don't actually try to preserve the integrity of the faith. Allow heresies to openly be debated. Pastor Jimmy Martin is smiling at this, by the way. Any intervention from Rome is probably going to stop on that issue. Let's continue. It is good that your task expresses that the Church, quote, encourages the charism of theologians and their scholarly efforts as they are, quote, content with a desk-bound theology, with a, quote, cold and harsh logic that seeks to dominate everything. It will always be true that reality is superior to the idea. In this case, we need theology to be attentive to a fundamental criterion, to consider as, quote, inadequate any theological conception that ultimately casts doubt on God's omnipotence, and in particular on His mercy. We need a way of thinking that can convincingly present a God who loves, who forgives, who saves, who liberates, who promotes people, and calls them to fraternal service. Let's interject again. Again, they're doubling down on mercy, mercy, mercy. I, for one, am relying on our Lord's mercy at my judgment, but that's because I understand His justice. Note the lack of justice here. They have said repeatedly that they believe the Church focused entirely too much on justice in the past. Let's keep going. This happens if the proclamation concentrates on the essentials, on what is most beautiful, most grand, most appealing, and at the same time most necessary. You know well that there is a harmonious order among the truths of our message, where the greatest danger occurs when the secondary issues end up overshadowing the central ones. Here the central one is mercy, and other issues are things like doctrinal clarity and a lack of ambiguity and Catholicity. In the horizon of this richness, your task also implies a special care to verify that the documents of your own dicastery and of the others have an adequate theological support, are coherent with the rich humus of the perennial teaching of the Church, and at the same time embrace the recent magisterium. That's an admission that they've changed the faith, by the way, the recent magisterium. Be wary when you see the phrases like recent magisterium. May the Blessed Virgin protect you and watch over you in this new mission. Please do not cease to pray for me. Fraternally, Francesco. Now, Archbishop Fernandez is quite the character himself. Diane Montagna provided this bit of information about him as well. Here we see what Archbishop Fernandez actually believes and what it is he thinks of the Church and her glorious past. I'll remind you, by the way, if you've watched my We Were Warned series, you'll know that prophecies of the Virgin Mary given by her appearances in the form of various proved apparitions in various places throughout modern history all say basically the same thing. The Church will be run during the spiritual chastisement in the final days before the material chastisement to befall men by men who apologize for her glorious past and seek to distort what the Church did in the past. The Church will be run by such men. Looks like we're here now. Quote, "You know that for many centuries the Church went in another direction. It unwittingly developed a morality and a philosophy full of classifications, to classify people, to put labels on people. This one is like this one is like that. This one can receive communion. This one cannot receive communion. This one can be forgiven. This one cannot. Terrible that this has happened to us in the Church. Thank God, Pope Francis is helping us to free ourselves from these patterns." End quote. Heaven forbid that we actually listen to what St. Paul and the rest of Scripture has to say about being worthy to receive the Eucharist. But again, that's too exclusionary. But as that letter from Francis makes clear, that's what Francis wants. He wants a universalism that looks Catholic, where all are welcome except those who want the authentic Catholic faith. That is the crux of Francis's comments about rigid traditionalists who cling to the clericalist past. The traditional faith is simultaneously welcoming to all, but it excludes those who unapologetically cling to their sins, much the same way the Lord does. Go forth and sin no more. The new religion can't have that, and Archbishop Fernandez very much represents the new religion. So what do you think of this? What should we expect from him? And remember, he will be made a cardinal very soon. That's going to happen. But I have to ask, do you have a copy of his book? Is it actually Catholic with just a provocative title, or did you need to go to confession after reading it? Do you think that he will become papabile by, technically speaking, when he's made a cardinal, because he will be, that is technically what's going to happen. He will be made papabile, meaning he will be technically able to be elected pope. And I don't just mean technically, because any Catholic man can be, but I mean all of a sudden he'll be taken seriously by his peers. What do you think the chances of that happening are? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help, as does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. And as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.